All right, so I will call us back into session for the meeting of the Budget Committee of Hood River County for the fiscal year 26-27 budget. The first item we have on our agenda, do any members of the committee have new conflicts or potential conflicts of interest to disclose that have not been disclosed in a prior meeting? Does anyone have any requests for additions or deletions regards the agenda? We have minutes from our session from April 23rd. Does anyone have any edits or errors they believe they see in those minutes? I'll entertain a motion to approve. Second. Okay. Any discussion? Anyone opposed to approving the minutes shared? All right, minutes are approved. Baker Tilly presentation.
Did we need to open it up for public comment?
Yes, we should do that.
Okay.
Thank you, I did. Is there anyone signed up to give public comment? Thank you, Allison.
I'm
Okay.
okay.
No, great.
Oh,
Okay. All right, now the Baker Tilly presentation.
Okay, well, good afternoon, Budget Committee, Board of Commissioners. As you know, it's not typical to go through a process and get to this presentation before you're working through your draft report and final report, but we were thrilled that Baker Tilly, who's been working with us since November of last year, would be available today to give you an overview of the hard work that we have ahead of us as a county. And so I will let our two team leaders on the financial analysis introduce themselves and start their presentation. Tammy, do you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you so much, Allison. Thank you all for having us this afternoon. It's great to be here virtually with you to share an update on our work together with the county. I'm Tammy Lohr-Schweitzer. I'm a director with Baker Tilly, and I've been the project manager for the financial sustainability and organizational assessment analysis that we've been working on with the county. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Andy. Andy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, sure. Thank you, Tammy. I'm Andy Belknap with Baker Tilly. I've been working with local governments for almost 30 years. About half that time as a direct employee of 3 cities and a county, as a public works director, a city manager, and a finance director, and about half that time as a consultant to local governments throughout the United States.
Perfect. So we'll take you through a brief presentation today to sort of summarize what the analysis is showing us regarding the financial situation at the county. Just as a reminder, in case you are not familiar, our project performs 3 separate functions. So first, we developed a long-term forecast, so looking at the county's financial position right now, as well as forecasting that out 10 years into the future. We conducted an organizational assessment to look at the structure, functions, staffing, and sort of resource utilization at the county to see if there were opportunities to streamline, to reduce staffing, to change service delivery structures, things like that. And then we also pulled those pieces together to develop some budget strategies in order to look at potential revenue options, cost sharing options, and service delivery reductions if necessary. So that is what our charge was. As Allison mentioned, we're just preparing our full comprehensive draft report at this point, and that will be hopefully headed to the board in June of a month or so away. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Andy to start talking to you about the financial analysis.
Okay, this slide just talks about our general assumptions that go into the financial analysis that we've done. And the biggest thing I guess I want to point out here is that on the expenditure side is growing faster than the revenue side. of your budget. And that is obviously that's a concern, but it's also a reality that you face because your revenue sources just aren't going as fast as the expenditure side of your budget. And we'll see what that entails for the budget in just a moment. And next slide. So the trends, as I mentioned, the trends are not encouraging, both on an actual basis and an estimated basis and a budgeted basis. The county is in a deficit when it comes to the general fund and the special revenue funds, which is where 98% of the revenues and expenditures are found. And for 25-26 and for 26-27, the deficit, expected deficits are pretty significant. I would say very significant given the revenue and expenditure side of the budget. In aggregate, around 15 million on a $50 million budget. So that's substantial. Next slide, please. Now in 23-24, which was the last kind of good fiscal year, we went back and looked at that, and it was a good year because the county got some extra timber revenue. So it can't be considered a normal year, unfortunately. Since then, as I showed you, the results have been negative. And as I'm going to show you in a moment, this is not something where there's a lot of time because the fund balances are not huge. The fund balances are really pretty minimal relative to that deficit I just showed you. So as we wrap up this presentation, we're going to be talking about what the county can do in the near term to shore up its situation, especially when it comes to revenues, because as you're probably all pretty aware, on your spending side, on your expenditure side, you're already pretty lean. Next slide. This shows the proposed budget for the coming fiscal year. And there's two things that I guess I want, or three things really that I wanted to point out. Number one, there's a substantial deficit. The difference between revenues and expenditures is you've got revenue of 37 million total and expenditures of 50 million. So that's a large gap. The general fund is already insolvent. There's no reserves there. So that's also a red flag. And finally, if you look at the bottom line, the fund balance, as I was mentioning, that fund balance is not robust compared to the, deficits always happen. Local governments run deficits from time to time. That's nothing per se to be alarmed about. They happen. But when your deficit spending threatens to erode your fund balance, that can be a problem because then your government is teetering on the verge of insolvency. And here you see that this deficit is large enough that if it happens again, you could exhaust what fund balance you have because the fund balance is projected to be, well, around, it's under 30 million anyway, even if you come up somewhat better than projected. So it's not a large fund balance, and that amount of the deficit will eat into it on a pretty big basis. So we have to be concerned about this because that's only 2 to 3 years at this level of deficits. It's only 2 to 3 years. Next slide. And this is what we project based on our fiscal modeling. If things keep going this way, And this slide is titled, "This Cannot Happen," because it quite literally cannot happen. You don't have that much money. So we can't run a deficit of this magnitude, because long before 2035, you'll be out of money. So this literally cannot happen. You'll be out of money. And so the county would be insolvent, and there's just not that much money here. You can't run that kind of a deficit because you don't have that much in the way of fund balances. So next slide. Your general fund revenues, like everybody, every local government in Oregon, you're reliant upon property taxes. The other thing you're reliant upon is transfers and intergovernmental revenues. And that's always a little bit risky because those can be pretty volatile. Property taxes are a good source of revenue. They come in about the same. They grow a little bit every year. They're a good source of revenue, but the transfers and the intergovernment revenue can vary a lot. So that's also what I would call a yellow flag that has to be considered. Next slide. We looked at neighboring counties and to get some peer comparisons, and Hood River compares pretty well. The staffing level it's a little bit above the peer average, slightly, I guess I would say, but not a lot. It aligns well. The thing that stands out, I guess, for Hood River is in terms of your size geographically, you're very small. I think one of, if not the smallest county in the state, and I guess that can be good for service delivery in some ways, and your population is also relatively small. So you're not going to have the advantages of some of these counties that can have some pretty impressive economies of scale because they're doing things on a large scale. That's not going to accrue to your benefit. But you do have a slightly higher than average FTE count. Next slide. So I guess to summarize this, just to be able to maintain services, the county is going to need to implement some combination of new revenues and reduced expenditures ranging from 4.4 million to 5.9 million, depending on how much, to what extent you utilize your unappropriated reserve, which is a good thing that the county does. The county budgets an unappropriated reserve in its expenditure budget, so it may not have to use that. But those budget savings, if you will, are going to need to grow to 6.5 million by 2035 to stay in balance. And that's a large lift for the county, given the size of your budget. And I don't know how much expenditure reduction is available here because you're already pretty lean. We're not taking into account capital outlay, and I just don't see how you can do much capital outlay, given you are doing some in the budget now. You may have to rethink that as you determine how to make these expenditure and revenue adjustments. But it's apparent that you've got to immediately pursue new revenue sources. And you should consider expenditure reductions, and you might want to consider freezing hiring. You're recruiting for new employees at the moment, and you don't want to recruit new employees if you're going to have to turn around and start doing layoffs, which I wouldn't put that out of the picture, given what this budget picture looks like. Now let's talk about what you can do about this. Let's go to the next slide. These are some revenue options that we have suggested that the county might want to consider. The first one is a food and beverage tax. And at a 5% rate, we think this could generate approximately 2.6 million annually for the county. There are 2 cities in the state that have this. So it's not widespread, but it's not unheard of. And it would generate that 2.6 million would be a real important additional revenue for the county. There's also provision in state law for a 10-year property tax for capital. And we think you might want to pursue that to take care of some capital needs in the county. We had recommended that perhaps it be sized at 1.5 million annually, and that could be used to support infrastructure needs, facilities, and equipment needs, get that money out of being funded from the general fund. Another property tax option for 5 years could be used for operations. And we suggested that that might be considered in the range of $1 million annually to rehabilitate assets and basically get things repaired before they fail. We also think you might want to consider increasing the existing public safety operations levy, because and you cover more of those costs for the sheriff from this levy, and that could raise an additional 2.7 million annually and replace some general fund contributions that are currently being made. There's an option for a increase in the transient lodging tax, which wouldn't be a huge amount of revenue, but it's a fairly easy thing to do. People will usually support that. And then the last 2 things are things that the county could do on its own without having to call for a vote. One would be to bring on some additional resources so that you could optimize your property tax collection, bring on some additional appraisal staff so that you could get appraisals done more basically increase your appraisal activity so that you could increase your property tax revenue collection. And then finally, and I think probably the first thing you should do would be update your user fee collection strategy. You've got departments that are providing services where we can directly where we know that are directly benefiting individuals, such as community development, recreation, and environmental health, where they're doing permitting activities that are receiving funding from the general fund. And that doesn't need to be. Those activities can be funded and should be funded, arguably, from permit fees. So we would recommend you immediately update your user fees so that people that are receiving permits from the county pay for those permits with user fees. And that can be started right away. There's no reason to wait on that. No reason to continue subsidizing permits that's something that can start filling this budget hole right away. So with that, I think we'll close and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you all juggling your timeline to be able to provide us that information and with so much clarity. I really appreciate it. Just the one thing, to be sure we're understanding here, you had said fiscal year 2027 needing an additional 4.4 to 5.9 million positive in the budget. Would that
Mhm.
be a year that starts in the middle of 27 and goes into 28? Is that what you mean by fiscal year 27?
That would be for the fiscal year 26, 27.
So the one we're looking at right now,
Yes,
meaning that there's 4.4 to 5.9 off in terms of the balance between revenue and the recommended balance between revenue and expenditures.
right.
Thank you.
I'm hoping to do better than what's laid out in the proposed budget for the coming year.
Thank you. Okay, really, I didn't know which year you were talking about for sure. Other questions? Letty, with
With
Commissioner
some
Byam.
of those,
Ready.
thank you, yeah. With some of those ideas to generate revenue, were you also able to capture potentially an amount, a cost for those? Like the food and beverage tax, what that would cost the county to move forward with that?
No, that's a really good question. There would be some costs to administer a food and beverage tax. But they would pale in comparison to the revenues you would generate. And I do think that if you want to move forward with that, we should look at that and figure out, what are those costs going to be? What are you going to have to put in place to administer that? There will be some costs, but typically you can offset some of those costs with a license too.
Thank you.
There was a final slide there too. Obviously, they're doing a high level overview for you today. There's been a full analysis done of our organization, and the full report will include alternative service delivery options and potential reductions, and that's all part of their final report. That is all being put together.
Yes, Arthur.
So-
Commissioner
In one of your first slides, you said the general fund is insolvent, and then you defined that by saying that there were no reserves. But then later you talk about the fund balance and our unappropriated ending fund balances, which we continue through. When you use the word insolvent, in what context? Can you explain more what you're saying?
I'm just referring to the fact that there's really no fund balance remaining in the general fund. There is an unappropriated amount of money that's in the budgeted expenditures. And I suppose if that's not expended, that's going to go back into the general fund balance. But it's been appropriated as sort of a contingency, leaving zero in the general fund balance.
But I thought the state law required it to be budgeted that way.
That's unappropriated, cannot be tapped
Cannot,
into.
it cannot be,
Unless there's
you can't spend unappropriated.
Right.
Okay.
Contingency can be.
Well, I think it's a good budgeting practice, whether it's the county's policy or the state's. I think it's a good budgeting practice. I just wanted to point out that you just don't have a really a fund balance remaining in the general fund. It's been depleted.
I don't want people to get confused because there's actually, if you look at this budget, if you look at the balance which we're not allowed to spend in the general fund, plus things that are of currently allowed to be used for general purposes like the timber interest fund. We have about $9 million kind of.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's zero cash.
No,
People,
no, it's not that there's zero cash. You still have, you still have, from latest statements I've looked at, you still have just under $30 million available. But if your deficit spending at the rate of almost 14 or 13.5 million, that won't last too long.
yeah, I think your point that it's unsustainable is well taken. The terminology, I think, we have people listening on YouTube and stuff like that who may get
Okay.
may interpret that differently than you intended it. And
No, I don't mean to say that the county is insolvent today. It is not.
And just for the record, we're not the smallest county in the state. We're the second smallest.
Second smallest.
No,
Okay.
the smallest is Multnomah.
Yeah.
Multnomah County is the smallest one in the state. Largest population is the smallest county.
Yes, I stand corrected.
Thank you.
Just a fun fact.
I don't want to start pronouncing county names in Oregon because I won't do very well.
Next question's from Matt.
Could you just elaborate a bit on the levies you went over in your slide? You mentioned an operational levy, essentially like a capital bond to fund capital projects, and then increasing the public safety levy that we just passed last year. And then if you could kind of just give me an overall sum of those new revenue sources that you were talking about. That would be helpful.
Yes, you can't increase the basic property tax levy, but you can put in place these two kinds of temporary property tax levies with a vote. One's for capital and one's for operations. And given the need for revenues, we would suggest that Hood River look at both of them and maybe prioritize the capital levy first to get any capital monies out of your operating budget. And I don't know all the planning that went into the public safety levy, but if there's a way to go back and increase that, and maybe not for the whole amount that we put in our write-up, maybe for a lesser amount, if there's a way to go back and increase that, in other words, ask for more, we would suggest that because there's still general fund dollars going to the sheriff. We would suggest that, but the biggest one would be that food and beverage tax. And that, because you do get, you correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a significant amount of tourism, and that would bring in some pretty good revenue.
Yeah, so if you were to implement all three of those property tax levies, then you would have about $5 million annually. And the public safety levy, we have written that to be up to the amount of the full general fund amount that's going to the sheriff's office right now. So that's if you wanted the sheriff's office to essentially be funded entirely through a tax
That's
or
basically
a levy, rather.
this budget.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And if we could, while we're on this page, just again, updating those user fees could be started right away. And that could have a pretty significant impact as well.
It is interesting in reviewing the last iteration of the prepared food and beverage tax that was done in 2019. The ballot language identifies it as a measure to offset the cost of the tourism impacts in the county. And so it was specifically parks, recreational trails, sheriff, search and rescue, emergency management. Those needs are still there. If you think about, our average employee rate may be a little bit higher than our comparables. But we are also supporting the impact of over $4 million in visitors a year. And so there are unaccounted for costs related to the impacts on our roads, use of services. And I equated it to, if every tourist were to pay $1, and we often drive across the bridge and pay sales tax and white salmon and don't bat an eye. What a difference it would make here. And I think it is also a conversation that can be had with our cities as well. So.
Yes, I think that that emphasis on offsetting the impacts from visitation with the food and beverage tax would really appeal to the taxpayers.
Didn't work last time.
I think
Well,
there's a huge effort that we need to identify to ensure that we're pointing out what the county does that people value. And that's part of all of the work our team behind us has been doing in terms of putting together the videos, identifying all the good work that we do. Because I think if there were things that had to go away, that there's a value there that people would easily identify. But that's my positivity.
Yes, Commissioner Warren.
I'm not sure if Baker Tilly can answer this, but are there any laws or rules against waiving that food and beverage tax for locals if they show their local ID?
I'm not an attorney. But I think normally you can't treat people differently when it comes to taxation.
Do you all remember when Washington would waive our sales tax if you showed an Oregon ID? So
That was actually because it's actually technically not legal for them to be taxing Oregon residents. So they did not have the constitutional right to do that. And so you were proving that you met that requirement, and
now they,
Lisa
but,
can double check me on
yeah.
that, but that was my recollection.
but now they do.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. No.
I would be interested in, I think that would help us move this tax along if that was possible.
I think that's a good question for your attorney.
Chris, you had a question?
I have a detailed question and an overarching question. The detailed question might better be answered by Allison. With regard to the transient lodging tax, is that a state tax or does the county have full prerogative to implement and change that tax?
Well, it's statutorily, it just went through an update during the last legislative session, and I know that Arthur did a deep dive on it. So statutorily said in terms of how we collect it, they did identify that we are charging a rate that we can increase. Some counties are considering implementing the new authority, which is a 50-50 split of the tax, and layering it over the cities. Obviously there's some research that needs to be done there, but the consideration would be access then to the substantial activity that happens in the cities, because the portion that happens in the county at this point is small. But I mean, in terms of the nexus from 8 to 12% is something in a budget where we're trying to account for every 100,000.
Absolutely.
Can you say what's the split currently on the transient room tax?
So we are grandfathered in a 90-10 split, and the 90% is for tourism promotion or tourism related infrastructure. So the county has been utilizing that substantially for the capital improvements related to our campgrounds.
So the county has to do a 90-10 split of the revenue the county gets? And does the transient room tax all come to the county?
And do we keep the 90 or the 10 as the county?
Both. 10% is administration, the other 90% has to be used according to statute, which includes the infrastructure associated to tourism, which our campgrounds host tourists.
So
It is
I'm
very-
aware of a room tax that goes to like Chamber of Commerce or someone
Right.
for tourism promotion. Am I getting my taxes mixed up?
That's the city.
City.
The county used to, the county, 8 years ago, identified that the work that was needed on its campgrounds would qualify as an alternative. You're not required to give it to the Chamber of Commerce. It's required to be used for either tourist promotion or capital investment in, and there's some long list of details to it. And this is always litigated by the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association if you do anything even slightly out of ordinary. So you want to be really careful with what you do. And in our case, we had a really clear situation where, 90 to 100% of the use of these campgrounds is people visiting for more than 50 miles, which is the statutory definition. And it was capital investment in broken infrastructure. So we could use those funds for that instead of what we previously did, which is we turned them over to the visitor council.
And we get the ones for lodging outside of city limits, but in the county. So any
Correct.
lodging in the city limits goes to the city.
Correct.
Which is small, and the question is, apparently, you just stated that other counties are looking at layering a county tax on top of city tax, which I was not familiar with until someone asked me about that today. It never really mattered because the numbers were so small that you would benefit from it. But now that the new statute changes the balance, it's worth understanding. But you haven't got a legal opinion on that, have you?
I have not.
Yeah, because years ago, the city attorney told me that the county can't tax people in the city for something that the city's taxing people on. But apparently, we have some counterexamples which suggest that there might be some subtlety that we don't understand.
Thank you.
Arthur, off the top of your head, so in terms of the county, does it apply to all types of lodging? That means short-term
Include
rental,
short-term
bed and
rentals,
breakfast,
Yeah,
bed and breakfast
exactly.
as well, okay?
Bed and breakfast, short-term rentals, hotels.
All
Yeah.
right, so if it does extend to the city, then the county would start to get a share of the transit lodging taxes paid on these massive hotels.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, there's an interesting thing which we've never followed up on, which is the cruise ship dock.
Mm,
Which the cruise ship dock, while it looks like it's in the city, is actually in the county.
Yes.
There's a diagonal line that runs through there, and what happened to be docking is within the county, and they're currently not paying transit lodging tax on that. So that might be something which I think you're aware of that, right, Derek?
And I had that conversation with
Or
them,
somebody
and
else.
they provided documentation. So we would need to test that documentation for why they don't.
They claim exemption.
So if I could then go back to my general overall
Yes, thank
question for Baker Tilly. At the outset, you said that you had a financial model with some very, very 30,000-foot assumptions. Is there also going to be a financial forecast that gets into line items and assumptions about line items?
Yes,
Forecast based on not just the projected budget, but those specific assumptions?
yes, we have a pretty detailed financial model that'll be part of our report.
Okay, great.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Andy, in your experience, when you see a city or a county bring on staff in the assessor's office, how long do you expect it would take them to actually start generating revenue on reassessments, things like that? Like what should we shoot for?
Well, they told us, Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, but they told us that it would be fairly near term. They had the resources to start doing appraisals, that they could see revenue enhancements fairly soon, within probably a quarter.
Thank you.
I think when Brian talked about that, didn't he say that he would restart the 6-year cycle or 5-year
Yes.
cycle? So it would be, the full benefit would be
1 to 2 years. Yeah.
1 to 2 years. I thought it was 5 to 6.
This year. 5 to 6, sorry, you said 5 to 6.
Okay.
For
Oh,
the
it's right there.
For the full cycle, yes,
Okay.
for hitting that full cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, do you mind? Because I remember that we promoted from in, yeah.
And that it would really not be a quarter before we started seeing revenues with this one hire. Right, Ryan, it would be a couple years of training up.
Yes, I believe it'll take a couple of years. Each new staff member will start to see impacts. But to the full extent of the impacts, it's gonna take time.
If you were to get another position, what are the odds you think you could hire someone who already has the skills?
Yes, I mean, that's the great question, right? I mean, if we can find the right person that's been doing the work, there's substantially changes the amount of time needed to get going, but that's not easy to do in our area.
You did try that, right? And you
Yeah.
weren't successful, so you hired and you're training with them.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure everyone knew that.
Well, then all the more reason to look at those user fees, because people are walking out the door with permits today that you're not collecting the full cost on.
Andy, are you able to elaborate with some examples of actual user fees you think we could modify that aren't very efficient right now?
Your restaurant inspections, they're not collecting the full cost of restaurant inspection. Same thing with building permits.
So typically, community development departments have a 90 to 100% cost recovery. Right now, your community development department is at 10%, which creates about a $900,000 a year general fund subsidy. Your environmental health services, it has about $100,000 general fund subsidy. When you combine just those two, you have $1 million of user fees that the community is subsidizing essentially for individual benefit.
Wow.
Other questions?
Just on the theme of user
Yeah.
fees, Allison, do you have a document that lists all of the fees in the county?
We have a fee schedule. It is
Yeah.
on our website, yes. And
It
there's
lists
an opportunity.
Everything?
It's everything. Yeah, opportunity twice a year to do that. But yeah, that's one of the items identified is doing that holistic look at all of the user fees.
Don't expect it to be easy to read.
No, that's okay. Again, I'm a fan of just incrementing that by 3% every year, plus looking at individual ones on a
We
rotation.
do, that is what we do.
Yeah.
That's currently the process, but is he correct in, I'm sorry, Tammy, it was Tammy correct, saying that we're only recovering 10% of the costs of providing community development, or community development is more than just permits?
Well,
So what's the real story on fee recovery?
so community development includes planning department and the building department.
Right.
The building department is 100% fee. All their services are covered by permit fees. There's no general fund
That's what I
impact.
thought.
The planning department, I estimated was fees together with a national scenic area grant that we get is in the range, depending on the year. I estimated 15 to 20%.
Okay.
And so it aligns, it's consistent with what Baker's really has found. So it's really just it becomes a policy discussion of, do you keep your permit fees low to encourage people to come in and apply, or do you raise them to cover costs, realizing that people may be hesitant to apply for things and it may impact development that.
So there was some discussion, I think, at the last budget meeting about the surveyor and the engineer. It was at the last meeting, where the statement was made that that this budget transfers some of the cost of those folks into the general fund because of their involvement in either the permitting, the building permit, or the planning process. I don't remember the specifics of how it was described to us, but it was stated that the part of that payroll was being moved into the general fund in this budget. Did I get that right?
No, it's currently, I think the point was it's currently funded out of the road fund. And, work, however, is done for general fund purposes. And so there is a need there to identify the additional offset.
So there's a request for that, but that hasn't happened yet. Okay, so it's not in this budget.
Yeah.
I remember the discussion, I just couldn't remember exactly where it fit on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have another overall one for
Yeah.
Baker Tilly.
I think Trish wanted to say a
Oh.
few words about environmental health.
Okay.
Yeah, last year we did increase environmental health fees by a total of 18%. We haven't yet realized the full impact of that, and because of the timing of the restaurant renewal fees is in January. We increased it by 8% in July and 10% in January. And so we won't see those restaurant fees at the higher rate until January, before January, this coming of 26.
Getting things into the cycle.
Yeah, and by county rules, we can only increase fees in January and July. And so.
Is that something, is that in our county code or where is that?
Yes. In our administrative.
In a certain county?
So we had talked about increasing fees again for July 1st, but it feels like, you know, we don't want to get into a place where we have more unlicensed operators working because the fees just feel like they keep jumping.
I think we all eat at a lot of food carts, so we care about that.
What is the county's method of keeping up on licenses for the business to actually enforce that?
So we send first notice of billing in November for all businesses. And then we just keep track of those payments that come in, and we re-notify them, you know, in December, and in January, if they haven't paid, it's $100 late fee for every month that they don't. And we do enforce, you know, ask them to shut down if they're operating without a license.
For a food cart that may only be operating for a season or two, there is very little enforcement opportunity there, it sounds like.
We do inspect all of the food carts. Sometimes there's transitory food carts that come in and go, and we hear about and try to find and can't find. Oftentimes, for like temporary events, we will get applications from food carts that are licensed in another county. And we can give them a temporary license based on they were eligible somewhere else. We always try to inspect them if we can't. We have a small staff, so they can't work 24/7. So we try to get to all of the events, as much of the events that we can. And we have sent people away a lot of times. Food carts that have been licensed in other counties may not fit our standards, and we send them away. So there is as much enforcement as we can cover with our staff.
Thank you.
Any other
Thanks,
questions?
Trish. Yeah, Madam Chair. I think I heard this morning that Baker Tilly has a hard stop at 4, which means you have 10 more minutes.
Great.
Ask a question.
Thank you, appreciate it. One more general question. You said that your model uses the general fund and all the special revenue funds. Do you also split out the general fund on its own at some point? The issue there is that special revenue funds theoretically have revenue that matches expenditures over time. And that any special revenue spending could be stopped when the funding source stops. But they're segregated specifically for that reason.
Yes, the funds are all separate in the model.
Okay.
Other questions or gaps to fill in at all? All right, Allison, Clayton, Sherry, anything you want to clear up or have any comments on while they're still here?
I would just say that, we will get the full report. They are modeling some scenarios for us in that full report. I think what we heard today is that, there are a number of combinations that would get us to that ultimate goal. And so it's a matter of, having their recommendations and then prioritizing those and going to work. And so we've got a process to head through after June.
So these are the finance folks we're talking to. Remind me again what the other levels are, Baker Tilly, who the other
So
folks are on the team.
Tammy is the project manager. And so Tammy, do you want to identify all the folks on the team?
Sure. So I am the project manager, so I oversaw both the financial modeling and the organizational assessment pieces. We have a number of team members that joined us on this project. So we have Matt Stark, who's our engineer for the financial model. We have Prachi Patel, who is our analyst, who's been supporting a lot of the work. And then we had a number of special advisors who also participated in this engagement. So those are folks like Andy that have lived experience. They're usually, retired police chief was involved. We had a former CIO who was involved and met with Josh, the IT director on your side. And so we brought in some special advisor for specific components. Al Zelinka talked with community development, for example. So we had other folks that we pulled on that have that real world experience being in the position that the county's in.
So at what stage in this process do the political realities get layered on this?
I think that
Or
comes
is that our
down.
job?
Yeah, that's our job.
Well,
Yeah.
I know, I certainly know that we have to do, I'm wondering if what sort of assistance we're getting in the report on that. What sort of analysis, what sort of backup will be there to help us appreciate? I mean, we know what we've tried, we don't know how things have worked elsewhere. And that sort of is the political reality.
I would just want to be sure what you're asking in terms of the scenarios that they're running for us, what the success might have been in other places. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, well, just as a simple thing, the food and beverage tax, we tried it, it failed by a lot. Did we do something wrong? Is there now a new model that works better? Is there some reason why we're talking again about something that wasn't close before? How much, what assistance can we get in appreciating and understanding why we should be looking at that again?
Yeah, I think that is part of our work also. And so one of the reasons when we were approached, for example, by the Trust for Public Lands about looking at just a wildfire specific evaluation is that when we looked at the food and beverage tax the first time, there were a number of parks open space issues in there. I think utilizing a process like that to go out to the community now versus where it was then will give us a picture of what might be successful.
But
So,
Baker Tilly has not been involved in doing that.
correct.
Great,
Correct.
thanks.
I'm realizing I have a question about this, which is for these measures that you've proposed that would be possible for revenue generation, are you also able to map the sequencing in Oregon about when they could go on ballots and when they would take effect and when the money would come in? Is that part of the information that we'll get?
So what we'll do after we develop our final report is we actually have been working with Allison on developing an implementation planning workshop to be able to map out specifically what are the priority levels of each one of these, what is the implementation plan for all of the recommendations, both organizationally as well as financially for the county. And at that point, we can provide that additional information that follows the final report.
Okay, I'm thinking about kind of the glide path we're on regards unallocated balances and that, and can you all help me understand if the commission were to decide in 3 months to go after a local option levy, when would the first dollars, if that were to be successful, when would the first dollars come in?
So in
November 27.
2027, yeah.
November 27. So just not in this budget, but in the subsequent year's
Right.
budget.
Right.
Okay. And food and beverage tax, when would that money start to arrive if that were to be successful?
I think it's the same timeline, but we would want to verify that.
I think the last time that was in January, the assumption was that began on January 1st. That's what I recall.
If we,
And that was based on a November ballot, so I guess that it would also match the timing.
January 27. January 27 is, I believe, if we'd have to go back and check the records, but I believe that, is that how you remember it? So we got two people who remember it that way, so how can we be wrong?
So November 26 ballot could lead to January 27 initiation of
Or sales
a
tax.
revenue.
Right. But food and beverage tax is a form of a sales tax, just like a gas tax is. It's a tax on sales.
I thought we didn't say that around. here.
I say what things are.
As soon as that realistic.
That's pretty fast, right?
So we would need a resolution to review at the July meeting. Yeah, because early August is the deadline for a referral.
Right.
For the November.
So more
ballot.
likely,
But you get the same result with the May election. I'm sorry, no, with the.
well, on a local option, you get the same. result.
Local option, you get, this November or the following May, you get the same result for something that is dependent on property taxes.
Yes, thank you.
Not
Okay.
the sales tax.
Okay, I guess, so just that's a helpful thing for me to think about as we look at the task in front of us, which
Yeah.
is 26-27 budget.
Right.
Just none of these revenue fees, yes.
The fees is only one.
But the other revenues would not come in. It would be the following year budget that might be impacted by success in one of those areas.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I guess that's where my question comes. You'd be able to forecast in January of 27 or somewhere along in there. So when we meet, we're forecast the amounts that we might see in 27, when we're doing the 27,
Right.
have an idea.
But it would perhaps be dependent on an election that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, correct.
That's what I'm doing. Yes.
Anything else for Tammy and Andy? No, they gotta go.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Gotta go.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
available.
Thank
Thank
so-
you.
Oh, we really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
We have a couple ways we can go. We've gotten some additional information, the departmental videos, some of the trend information, which some trend information, contract info. We also have, I feel like, sort of a big question in front of us, which is, do we as the budget committee recommend this budget that we were presented, or do we ask staff to do something different quickly? Because we have a week left to finish our work, just to kind of stay on time. What's folks' inclination as far as, I guess I would encourage us as much as possible to look at the big question. Certainly there are many little questions. What's this line in the contract services budget, all that. If they're less than $1 million, I'm not sure that's what we want to be talking about right now. Not to be, that's just sort of my opinion about getting us across the finish line. So with that said, yeah, Sherry, where would you like to take us now?
I was just thinking that, if we could get immediate results from an appraiser. And I know we ran the ad for a couple weeks and we didn't attract anyone. If in this next week, we could do some research on that pay scale. I know there's appraisers in the world and or, maybe we're providing the wrong scale. It's a new position for us. Perhaps we could reevaluate this area and how much we could realistically start earning in a quarter, and would it pay for itself within a year?
Well, and I would just, I think we had a recommendation from our records assessment director based on the applicant that we got, and an offer has been made to fill the position. So I think we've got, yeah, we should do some internal talking about that, but I think there is some support for that, obviously, if there was another position.
Yeah, that would be my understanding. We'd not be talking about the person you've already hired to fill the existing vacancy, which was approved for this current year budget, but
Right.
rather a second additional person.
And maybe
Yeah.
it's a senior appraiser who's already experienced and could start the work right away. And earns more money.
You give them a house, dude.
That's the first. Yeah, I mean, well,
It's always the
yeah,
first
if
step.
you'll wanna work up something, we'll certainly entertain it within, you know, what we're trying to do.
It seems to be the only viable immediate option. We could look into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I don't think Director Beebe would mind my saying that when I had a brief talk with him, he phrased it in terms of equity, in terms of fairness. That not having all the properties reassessed, that having some properties 10, 15 years behind isn't fair to those people who have made changes and are paying taxes legitimately on those changes.
If it would pay for itself. First year.
Equity as long as it pays for itself, is that what you just said? So at some point, you know, I provided some graphs. I'm happy to talk through this. I
Yeah.
don't know where you want to fit
Well, I
that
think
into the whole
those-
thing.
I mean, those sort of fall in the big question bucket for me, would you? Anyone frantically want to do something different? Yeah, well, if you want to run us through the information that you helped prepare that was shared, that'd be awesome.
Okay, can we get that up on the screen?
It's gonna take me a minute.
So the background I'll give is that I find the budget process always very frustrating and confusing because you're dealing with data that's kind of a minimum of 2 years old, and then you have a window of 3 years. So you're looking at 3 years, 2 years ago, when you look at the budget document, and that makes it really hard to see trends. And it also makes it hard to respond in reasonable time when things happen. And so we know, for example, we had PERS bump that happened, and that doesn't really even show up in the budget document as clearly because it was, because it affects a year which we haven't closed out yet. So what I did was I asked, I don't know if I can see that, I don't know if anyone could see, but I'll just explain what we're looking at, and you probably don't have to see anything, it's like big stuff. So I asked Sherry if she could just provide me with the ending fund balances for the general fund for, I think I asked you for a decade, and you gave me 9.
It was a decade.
You gave me a
You
decade,
said
right?
8 to 10 years. I said, what's wrong with 9? But I did think you said.
Oh, I misunderstood, okay. See, you made a joke and I didn't get the joke, sorry. So anyway, so Sherry provided me with that data, and then I went in and started to generate some other data to help understand and appreciate what's going on. And so if you look at the first 3 columns, it's basically what the ending balance is of the general fund at the end of each year. Obviously, with 2016 being the forecast that staff has provided to us, and 27 being based on the budget, which we have in front of us as a proposed budget. And you see the changes in the general fund ending balance, and you see some explanations in the notes column. In 2020, before June 30th, 2020, COVID funds started to arrive. And in May of that year, a levy passed, but none of the revenue for that levy came in until the following fiscal year, which is 2021. So that's the first fiscal year in which you see the levy. And then we see a big jump that happened in 2024, and that was because the federal government changed the rules with ARPA funds and said they basically took away all the restrictions and rules associated with it. So basically those funds were flushed into the general fund, and there's a $3.5 million that went into the general fund. And then you see that we've been spending that number down by a pretty precipitous or a pretty significant number each year. And so I wanted to better understand that there's a lot of noise in this, and in my opinion, the noise, a fair amount of the noise was coming from the fact that the general fund seems inextricably linked to the timber interest fund. So I did similar work for the timber interest fund to look at what the ending balance was of that interest fund over that period of 10 years. And I also looked at what years was it elected to transfer those funds, significant chunks of those funds into the general fund, and what years wasn't it. And then if you go over a couple more columns, I look at different combinations of the general fund and the timber interest fund to better appreciate what's actually going on. So if you look at where the cursor is right now, that's just assuming the timber interest fund is just part of the general fund. Those are the kind of the numbers that you get if you combine the two. And then I thought really I want to look at a different way, which is to look at what would the general fund look like if we were not transferring the money from the timber interest fund. And that's the analysis that you see there. And it's that to me is that last chart, the very rightmost column, which is the change there, that shows the unsustainability, the actual unsustainability each year, because you back out the one-time funds that were transferred in, which is the timber interest, and you look at the change from the previous year. So that's kind of I think a better way to just understand the magnitude of the magnitude of a lack of sustainability. And really, when you look at this, I kind of look at that change column and then go back to the notes column and understand what was going on. And basically, as we led up to the levy, the county was obviously in a very unsustainable position. It was really, with layoffs, with service reductions, was was sort of spiraling the drain past the levy and stabilized significantly for several years. ARPA funds then got piled on top of that, and that was kind of a windfall, really. But those funds were not used in a strategic way that when the COVID and ARPA funds started to come, there was significant discussion by the Board of Commissioners as to how strategically to use those funds. And by the time that happened, which is 5 years later, different makeup of the Board of Commissioners, different staff entirely, different finance staff, different county administrator, probably many of the other department heads were changed also in that time. So I think a lot of the knowledge of what the intent was lost, and instead that money went into the general fund and was just spent down over a period of years for general payroll purposes. And then what I did add in the notes column, but really is probably one of the meaningful things, is the PERS bump, which is kind of in the way I'm seeing things at this moment. And I want to do some more analysis to be sure that I view it this way, but I think this is what Sherry and Allison told us last year. I think if you look at the very rightmost column where you see the change, it goes, at 1 million, then 2 million, then 4 million. Obviously, that's exponential growth. But I think a significant cause of that is the PERS bump. And we did not have time to react to that because it was basically given to us with no significant warning time. And
Statewide conversation.
Yeah, I know we're certainly not the only county or city with this issue, or the only government with this issue, but you kind of see those numbers. Now, if we can go down to the graphs.
And if I could just offer a clarification. So for the ARPA dollars, because we want to be definite about that. There was a spending plan for the first 3 years, and those projects were completed. And then in 2024, we made the decision to claim the remaining. And so that's where you see the extra was to claim the remaining after that initial spending plan was essentially completed, and if there were expenditures that had not been done.
Yeah, and so my recollection is there was a priority list and there was a spending plan. And I think the priority list is what kind of got lost in the shuffle. I don't know that there's a important distinction there. And like I said, it's different staff, different board commissioners, just identifying that it was not the intent at the beginning that money would go into the general fund. It did. We've spent it. So there's no discussion to have on that. So let's look at the graphs. And probably the rightmost one is useful. The orange, whatever color you call that, mustard. That gives you, that's really identifying the unsustainability. And that does the best job of it. And you see the kind of the circling the drain for the first 4 columns, and then recovery with the levy. The levy worked pretty much as intended, and then the flush of ARPA funds, and then the like I said, my working model now is the PERS bump, and I want to do some more analysis, but you see it quickly going down, and that's where probably the glide path discussion happens. That you wanted to have. If we have a solution that works this year, then we have, in 1 calendar year, then we're fine. But if we don't, we're not.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I have a bunch of other points I want to make, but I think I'll wait until after we get into the discussion.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, I mean, often in a parliamentary body, we would have a motion on the floor to sort of debate an idea about, like, I think we should do this. I think the budget committee should recommend X. And if that gets a second, then we actually do have an idea to discuss. I don't know if folks want to throw out plan A, plan B, and we can kind of pull ourselves to see what it is. I'm open to how you think you want to proceed. I just would caution us about continued general discussion, because we do need to get to a recommendation. And if we want the recommendation to be something other than we approve this budget, I really feel like we need to get to that today.
So the way that we've been budgeting has not been particularly strategic. We have a budget where we over appropriate, and we depend on people retiring or leaving for other reasons, or positions remaining open longer than intended to make the budget balance, which means that we're not making strategic decisions as to what people are employed by the county. And that is fundamental to the nature of the way that this budget is written, where this budget over appropriates and depends on the fact that we won't spend all the appropriations. And so my first question would be whether there's some way we can ask staff what it would look like to budget the way that we used to budget and that most organizations budget, where you have where the appropriations are what you expect to be spending, not what you're permitting someone to spend, hoping that someone else doesn't spend it before they do. Did I say that clearly?
Yeah.
I have a question on that for Allison. Can you translate that for me with your words? I need to hear it a couple times just to get it. Like, do you understand what?
Well, I think we would look to the 3 of us, and so it's having the budget identify the clear spending plan, that, if I understand that correctly. Where my brain went, is that we budget on an annual basis, and we are, an entity that is a partner with the state, which budgets on a biennial basis. And so some of the issue that you're seeing with special funds is the fact that you've got a biennial, like 2 years of budget in those special funds. So that aside, talking about the general fund, I would then look to Sherry and Clayton about your thoughts in regards to the question.
When I heard it the first time, I thought we have to ask directors to go thinner with their budgets. And we had already cut so much, but when you're going to buy something at the store, do you just pick up $1 because you know it's gonna be $1, or do you take your whole wallet? So there are things that are gonna go over, there are things that are gonna come under. We do have a contingency, which we never touch. It's like our savings account. Knowing that we have the contingency to fall back on, could we make more sacrifices? I don't know that we could make $2.5 million worth of more sacrifices. I think.
Is this what you were getting at, or?
I think we're talking the same thing.
We're talking the same thing, okay.
Not, I think it's an agreement, but it's a different. It's a more traditional way of thinking about the budget, where we would go through, for example, each department would be going through and looking at all the positions and what percentage of the year are those positions going to be full. And so if something hasn't been, if there's not someone in a position, is it going to be filled? Are we going to fill it?
Like less control, right? Not really in control.
Well, we're not, I have no way to know if dollars going to be spent on a sheriff's deputy or a planning specialist.
So the issue that I see with that is asking department directors to forecast what they will really spend and then presumably holding them to it, which doesn't seem appropriate.
Appropriate now or ever?
At any point, really. I mean, if you have a director who is having trouble filling a necessary position and you say, okay, then you're going to forecast that you won't spend that money for the next 6 months and I'm going to hold you to it, that can cause some real chaos. I'd like to back up and propose an alternative. And that goes back to the original introduction to this budget, that it was intended to be a placeholder. I'm in the same position I was a year ago. This is a budget. This is a financial monitoring tool for the current year. To make the long-term kind of decisions you're talking about, it is absolutely essential to have a forecast and a good one. And I'm still hoping to see that. Until we see that, I don't feel comfortable making long-term decisions. I would propose that we pass this budget as is, knowing that the commission will, and happily with our help, if you wish it, take a good hard look at that forecast and that model and prioritize revenue generation over the next coming years, and actually make a commitment in the current budget year not to cut countywide staff FTEs. Not to cut countywide staff FTEs funded by general fund, but again, prioritize revenue generation. I could drop that last little bit if it makes you too uncomfortable. But I feel like if I were a department director, if I were in shoes of anyone in the audience, I would feel comforted by that. I would feel like I had license to do my job.
I think the other piece of it there that respects is the fact that we know we have a retirement wave coming in. So there's a level of stress of making sure that we have the staff there to do the succession planning. Every opening is an opportunity to revisit how we're providing services. Which is the other piece of this work that has been done, is making sure that we're structured the way that you see fit moving forward.
I guess I'm a little confused how you started with that. I have not done another city, county, school district, college organization budget that was done this way. And this, we only started doing it this way at COVID because of the huge uncertainty that came with this flush of money and with the insanity that was going on around us. So we sort of changed the model for what the budget was, where the budget is supposed to be the plan for expenses, and instead it became this wide envelope that was sort of just a general guide. And we knew that we were not going to expend very, having budgets that are frequently that are always significantly underspent is not something that most organizations have.
I think I would push back a little bit on that. Having budgets that typically don't match up with reality is typical. You hardly ever spend, or you hardly ever end a fiscal year exactly where you budgeted. And that's not a problem. That's not the goal. The goal is the budget is a planning document, and plans change and circumstances change, and that's okay. Again, that's where the forecast comes in. It can explain those discrepancies and figure out going forward how you can control them and affect them. And that's what we need.
In my experience in years past, budgets are also a messaging tool to say where you're prioritizing the use of your dollars and the services and programs you're putting forward. And that it is reasonable and conservative to think that you would underestimate revenues and underestimate expenditures, obviously, so that in order to look at that long-term forecast, you're intentionally creating a place for a reserve. That's all a matter of making sure your budget and your forecast works.
Really quick.
Wait, so is there a motion on that floor?
I haven't heard one. I mean, I would entertain a motion to get our community development utilization much higher. I think that's a really good place to start. That could get us money immediately. But what I was going to interject and say is that, I mean, for me, seeing the trend in every budget in this state is personnel driven costs. So I find it really hard to look at, especially this budget, and, feel like we need to protect FTEs at all costs. So, I mean, where that takes me is that I look at what departments can we cut, what services can we cut, and not like pick out one FTE here or there. I don't know how everyone else is feeling about that, but I mean, personally, it feels like we need to cut like a couple services on this budget, at least from my perspective. So, and that's unfortunately, I mean, that's not really my remit as a volunteer, and that kind of falls on the commissioners quite a bit more. But I don't know. That's just
and that is where at the beginning of delivering the budget message, understanding when those cuts get made, what the implications are of that. And that's why being able to go through that in a thoughtful process in terms of what we would give is why the placeholder budget was recommended. I'll give you a great example. So I don't know if you had a chance to watch the staff videos, but in the health department video, Trish identified that there was a new federal program, the rural
Health Transformation.
Yes.
Program.
Rural Health Transformation Program. So because we have a local public health department, there is a $200,000 set aside that then we will get that's not currently budgeted, but will allow us to provide some pretty essential home visit services. We get it because we have a local public health department. That's where it goes. So I think that's my only caution, is making quick cuts without understanding the impacts of it.
I totally respect that.
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from.
I don't have a problem with a placeholder budget this is what I said on the first day, I have no problem with the placeholder budget if there is an actionable plan in front of us, which explains how we don't just keep on going straight down and drill into the ground. And I haven't heard that plan yet. I am still not confident that a plan is forthcoming to do that. And what I heard today leaves me less confident because I know the reality of those revenue proposals that were made. I think those are 90% non-starters. So I don't feel like that was an analysis which I look forward to seeing the more detailed analysis, but the top level, the view from 30,000 feet that I see says, yeah, they identified all the different ways in the state they're allowed to raise revenues. And it's like, yeah, if we had more money, everything would be great. I don't see a reality in which we're successful at, there's some of them like the fees, which I think you're 100% correct on that. And I was kind of surprised to find that we're not in that state and definitely want to talk more about
Seems a
that.
meaningful
but-
amount of money, and I think to your point, Arthur, is that, everybody's gonna be going out for levies over the next decade. I mean,
Right.
you're gonna have a GO bond from the school district. I mean, it's gonna be a race to the bottom on the revenue side, I feel like.
Well, I as I'm really nervous about this budget for sure. I think that, again, I'm gonna circle back around. Every single year, we're back to this point, and every single year, nothing gets done. I think our main focus should be on a revenue generator, and we have to figure out how to do that regardless of the budget we have in front of us. We have got to work together to get this accomplished. And as I've explained it to lots of people who pay taxes in Hood River County that I visit with every single day, would you want your rent, and that's what I call taxes in my terms, to go up, or should we share this with everyone? And everybody that I talk to agrees that that sounds like a fantastic idea. I was not here when it got shot down the last time, but it just seems like it's not quick, but it's the most effective way to generate money would be through the food and beverage tax.
So you think that there's a possibility of a food and beverage tax passing?
Yes, from my constituents. I just hate to cut services. We have good services. And the struggle I have is who's gonna want to work for Hood River County when every time we come around to a budget cycle, we're talking about getting rid of a service.
Right.
That makes it very difficult for anybody who works for Hood River County.
The other thing is I'm really struck by Allison's $4 million suggestion, because that seems like a fairly good selling point. If we go out for a tax to explain that there are 4 million visitors to the river every year, and if we got $1 from all of them, that would be $4 million. I'm not saying those are the numbers that we would use, but I think that makes sense to a lot of people. I mean, if you go out to dinner, it's probably going to be more than $1 for some of those people. But it's really doesn't have to be that much per person. And that would, I don't know. I think that gets at how many people come here, how much of the money could come from the visitors. That's all. And I think what I hear is that that's what people want. They want the people who use our services but don't pay taxes here to help.
Well, and I think that 4 million number came from the Chamber's Datafy analysis. And they were looking specifically at those who were visiting, doing particular activities, hiking, and it didn't capture those who are also here doing everything else, and so I think that number is probably much higher.
They're probably all eating.
Yeah, sorry, the Datafy number is a very suspect methodology. I don't believe that $4 million, the 4 million count for a minute.
It is
You think it's
consistent
less?
with
I
the,
think it's significantly less, yeah.
it is consistent,
It's in their interest to inflate that number, because that's their business, selling that number.
it is consistent with the visitor numbers from the US Forest Service that
Yep.
they have utilized.
What do you think it is?
I don't know what it is, but I know that they have every incentive to inflate those numbers. And they have a model based on, cell phone tower pings. They're purchasing data And then they're using that with a model as to what percentage of these things that they capture based on how many people opt in. And now it used to be an opt out, now it's an opt-in system. And there's a whole bunch of stuff behind that that makes me just highly suspicious of numbers like that. So I was a big supporter of the food and beverage concept before. I think it's a very fair thing. So I'm not arguing with you at all on that. I'm simply arguing on the what glide path is reasonable for what I now consider a pretty low likelihood of success. You know, how close are you going to let yourself get to the ground for something that you can't guarantee?
What I heard from several people who tried to pass it last time is that there's a lot of people who believe that it was really the money that came in from the restaurant associations in Oregon that really tanked it, because they had money for all the glossy things that everybody found in their mailbox. And so the only way to counter that, there is no way really to counter that, unless there were some people who were in a position to have conversations with some of the big players in foods and beverages in Hoover County and ask them if there's any way to get their support at the beginning before we go out and do this.
100% agree.
Somebody needs to go talk to the big purveyors of food and recreation. And there are some big ones that if, you know, they wouldn't necessarily have to support it, but if it's the opposition it's the money to opposition that is the problem. And I don't know how many people on here are in a position to get involved in that kind of lobbying.
I think your analysis is 100% correct. And I think that would be key to a success. And I wasn't on the board of commissioners at the time that came up. I thought that there was a really poor job done of promoting that measure. But that said, given that it was put out and failed, that kind of soils the bed, so to speak.
But it also, I think people learned a lot from it. And the other thing that we would never know is if we had not sent a levy and a tax out on the same day, would one of them have passed? And I think it's really impossible to know if on its own, obviously later the levy on its own passed. And so what would be the fate of just a tax? And you don't actually have any idea what would happen if you put a tax on the ballot minus an accompanying levy from the same entity. And so the county asked for both at once. So I don't think we really know what would happen if we only asked for one.
The question today, though, is how do we allow such an unsustainable budgetary balance to proceed?
Well, go ahead.
Obviously, let's get down to it. What's your suggestion then?
Well, I think I didn't make a suggestion. I suggested that we do a strategic.
Do you have some ideas of what we should do with this budget?
What I said, the question I asked initially was, could we ask staff to present us with a budget that is of the style of not presuming that we were going to live on the float, that we're not presuming that the way we're going to balance the budget is by underspending our appropriations. Instead, to present us with a budget where the appropriations match what we were expecting to spend.
And how long would that take staff to do if we asked for that to happen?
We didn't come up with these numbers. It's really the departments. There is a lot of things that are one-time things that go in there, and a lot of it is personnel. So that was exactly, I mean, most of it probably is savings in personnel realistically. And so that really, you guys already had that discussion. We are putting the full budget for personnel expected, especially when people are not hired at potentially higher rates if they elect all their benefits and all their things. We put them in the budget, and realistically, some of them don't hire. And that's, I think they're filling a lot of those vacancies as well. So that's probably not going to continue to happen that way. So we're kind of looking at trend history saying that that's the norm, but I think a lot of those have got filled. So I think as we're seeing that spend down, this is happening more because
We currently
I don't-
have 14 openings. 5 of those are in 911. And that's right. So 9 plus budget for additional 3 more, so 12. And that's floated for this whole year because of the fluidity of our turnover.
You know, things like Mount Hood Town Hall, like people put it in the budget. They would not have the authority to spend or even go out and ask for grants and get if they didn't put it in the budget. So there's stuff like that, but mostly I think that the directors are trying to stick with their budgets.
So you're saying that we really will see, $3.8 million deficit this year?
If everything executes the way that they're saying, I think that they've been asked to be very lean on their estimates, and they've been asked to be very lean on their budget asks as well.
If
Yes.
Commissioner Babbitt, I think you're talking about an era of time where it wasn't a team that put a budget together. It was more consolidated and siloed. And it's easier to make decisions that way, but it's easier to make mistakes and miss things as well. So we don't do this budget, we just pull it together. I think Allison has some certain thoughts and a meeting planned early next week to come back with some suggestions if you want more suggestions.
I was feeling like the placeholder was getting some traction here.
It is worth noting on your spreadsheet, though, that we also did integrate the vehicle fund, which that's not really saying anything, but that's another. It's kind of a shell game. We're moving money from the general fund into the vehicle fund, but it looks like we're aggressively spending down while we've got another pot of money that wasn't there in the past. So. For vehicles though, right? And so that's the argument, but you see it leave the general fund, it's not in there, so it's kind of like you got. Like you rightly pointed out, timber deposit interest and the general fund are one and the same essentially, it's all up to the commissioners. But same with the vehicle fund, it's earmarked, but it's not restricted, it is. If you
We could
needed to
bring it
change
back.
your plan tomorrow, you could spend a whatever. It's just scheduled, it's earmarked and it should be for vehicles, because we know that's good, but. Kind of explains some of that big number that you got there, of where that money's kind of going. And then, of course, common cost incurs, like you said, and not having revenue.
So what you're kind of telling me is that we're already pretty close to that style of budgeting, so I should take these numbers at face value.
We're getting closer to that. We're definitely not seeing that big influx of COVID money that nobody expected, and we're not seeing the ARPA money that nobody expected. And yeah, I mean, we're getting closer and closer to where, and that's why we're spending down.
That's
So-
the reason for the analysis that we've gone through, so that we can look at our options and be strategic about what we're doing and be thoughtful about what we're doing across all of the county and all of these essential services that we provide. And the fact is that when you're in an era of uncertainty, so the point about being an attractive place to work, you also want government a place where you come for a long-term job. And this feels very uncertain. And so I think the placeholder budget also gives us the opportunity to continue that succession planning again. While we, again, thoughtfully look at options. Our department heads have gotten together and looked at the same information from Baker Tilly in regard to revenue options and different ways of doing business. And I think everybody would love the opportunity to put forward the reasons why a revenue source could happen. I think having a placeholder about a budget allows us to have the staff that can roll up their sleeves and try to get something to work, but it needs Board of Commissioner leadership and advocacy.
Maybe, I'm curious, Chris, I feel like you're pretty supportive of perhaps this budget is, and I'm curious to hear your thinking, because of the thing that is really concerning to me is this feeling that we've been spending down reserves, and this budget, especially if it's kind of on target more, would take us from like 5.8 million to 2.4 million. What, yeah, just interested in hearing more about your thinking about sort of on that glide path analogy. I'm worried that gets us awfully close to the ground and we're not sure we've got revenue to give us the lift so we don't crash. But I feel like you have so much expertise here. Can you share your thoughts a little more?
Well, go back to the conversation a year ago. Again, we had a budget, we have a 1-year planning document, we don't have a 5-year forecast. I want something, one of the big gaps between those two is the fact that departments don't fill all their vacancies right away. And you end up with a $500,000, $800,000 savings every year because of those unplanned vacancies. Difference between having a forecast model that shows you that so that you can realistically say where your ending fund balance is going to be. It's not going to be a 3.8 deficit, it's going to be X. And the alternate, which is going back to the departments and saying, okay, commit to not filling your vacancies for 6 months, is the difference between them being able to do their jobs or not. I want a forecast. I don't feel comfortable making long-term decisions for the county without financial forecast information.
Yeah,
It's
I
just-
think we agree on that. And the question is like, we're uncomfortable and given the lack of knowledge, still have to do something. Yeah. And I think we're having opposite reactions to what's the thing to do when your headlights don't show you enough road.
Well, the forecast would definitely clarify the forks in the road before you drive off the cliff. But we absolutely know that there are forks in the road. I agree with Arthur 100% on that. And I think we've all said that we should prioritize raising revenue. We have 6 options. I think we could name the top 3 in terms of which ones have the least pushback, which ones are the easiest, which ones are the fastest. We could probably both identify the bottom 2 as to which ones are least likely to fly. Just give us a plan on when to roll up our sleeves and work on it, and let's make that happen. But again, let's do it thoughtfully, let's do it long term, let's do it analytically, let's do it purposefully. Not seat of the pants by saying, oh my God, this 1-year document shows a 3.8 deficit and we have to slash spending and cut FTEs, and we're not that close to the cliff. We have time. We just need to drive well.
Would you be more comfortable if we added a part to the, because you did start to make a motion earlier. The first time that you explained this to us, right? You were talking about describing a motion that you might make. If the motion also included direction to the board to consider revenue sources, in the coming, do we want to be that specific, or do we? I think what is making people uncomfortable maybe is if we pass this placeholder budget, what will happen next? Will we come up with more revenue? So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know how specific everybody wants.
I mean, when I look at the revenue, even just the user fees might bring in 1/3 of what the deficit that we're looking at in a year. The food and beverage tax is gonna be 2028. If we're being realistic, if we're gonna do it well, we're gonna message it well. And I know the departments are already super lean, and I hear what Matt was saying, that we can't make the departments any leaner. It's looking at what I said last meeting. Where can we partner with other organizations to take on some of the work that the county's doing, because we can't afford to do it? And our staff might have to go work at those other locations because other people are doing some of the work that we're also doing. And we just can't all duplicate services. And that's the hard part. But that's the only place where I can see that we can become leaner. It's gotta be like departments. And partnering and contracting with other folks when it makes sense and when it saves money.
It seems like too much work to do in a week, doesn't it?
What departments is that?
That's Baker Tilly.
Yeah, it's again, it's the unfortunate thing of this plan coming out the tail end of all of this. Because the intention was to be able to develop a plan and then an implementation plan that would be a strategic roadmap. So that's coming. It's June and July work based on the time frame.
I guess that's, I think we all talk about the trajectory and can we survive? Are we gonna be able to get through that without cutting or sourcing services somewhere else? While we put the user fees in place. And just to fill positions and then have to put people aside.
I'm a little off red a bit on the food and beverage tax. I don't know, I found this kind of contentious, but Parks and Rec, they're back out for a levy, right? Because the first round was maybe $2,000, people didn't get behind it. They've pared things down, communicated maybe more effectively, and then they've also taken a board vote on both to say, if the levy doesn't pass, these are the services we're gonna cut. You know, if the pool passes, we're gonna do the pool. I mean, sort of like a gun to the head, but I mean, if we are mindful of how we're doing it and can say, hey, if this doesn't pass, we have to cut this department. We have to actually stop providing the services. I mean, that could be a means to sell the tax, but.
Well, and that is a part of the work that has to happen. If you put any one of those solutions out for a public vote, you have to identify what won't occur if the revenues don't materialize.
And that was done in 2019.
What was the same?
That way.
Oh, 2017 or 19, which.
19.
19, yeah, 2019.
What had to be cut at that point? Or was it just because COVID came along and raised everybody's?
What do you remember? It was patrol was significantly cut.
I mean, it was, even they were looking at.
Health
the
department.
Yeah, there was a significant number of services, and if that didn't pass, they were able to get through. So we could try again in 2020, but as was mentioned, there was two things run in 2019. So it was food and beverage, and then it was a general operating levy. So then we came back in 2020 and tightened that and specified these are the services that are paid for, which is, it went for one thing versus two, but it was a significant amount. There's the extension services to OSU that was on the list. There was expensive.
And this doesn't even include if we need to add more money for wildfire resiliency.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yep. Okay,
Finish your
sure.
thought. and then I'll make it.
Okay, I was just gonna ask, so I think I'm feeling partly motivated by this worst case scenario that I don't actually understand. So maybe as much as I hate to put detail, it might help my thinking. So if spending goes, maybe half of, ending balances are in the order of 3.8 million next year. There isn't maybe there's some fees, but there isn't a successful bid, levy or bond. Another year goes by at the same rate, the money's gone, like, what happens when a county runs out of money?
Well, we have statutory services that we have to provide, so there are revenues there to do work. It's a decision about what statutory services we continue to do with the dollars that are available. We will continue to get property taxes. We will continue to have user fees. And so again, it's going back to what those statutory services are and what's not a mandated service that you have to provide. So for example, the last time when we did the levy, we were looking at not continuing to fund OSU. The museum was on the chopping block. The health department would get given back to the state, and then a cut services in non-mandatory public safety services. So did I answer? Smart borders. Okay. It would be similar this time when I looked at what the food and beverage tax was going to fund. The needs have not changed. I mean, we're a lean county. We provide an array of services. And
I mean, none of us, none of us are disagreeing. We
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah.
And I wish the money was working out differently.
Yeah.
Like, how do I live with those two
Yeah.
realities? That I agree.
Yeah.
You're lean and with the county.
And we're in a better spot than most counties. I mean, that's serious for us.
Yeah.
But and I think the scenarios, I mean, that's part of the work that we have to do. I mean, we have to build the case and we have to do an if then. I mean, if we get this revenue, then this is what we provide. If we don't, then what is different? And that's
Yeah,
part of the
that's-
work.
Yeah, personnel expenses of 14 million.
Yeah.
2.8 million budget gap, that's 20%.
Yeah.
20% pickup, 20% staff layoff or like just. Plucking something out. Okay,
So last year.
thank you, I appreciate going there.
Last year, I was making the argument that Chris has been making that, as to why it was reasonable to put a placeholder budget in place. Because we needed a year to come up with a plan. And now it's a year later and I'm hearing we need time to come up with a plan. And we don't have a plan in place. So what I have to understand to accept an argument like that is what management controls do we have? And what planning is reasonable to expect? What can it be confident that we will have in what time frame? And what management controls do we have so that we don't veer off the road as we're getting to that process? Remember last year, I suggested a hiring freeze and basically having all rehires, all position fills be referred to the Board of Commissioners for approval. And people argued me down on that
Policy versus administration also.
I think you made a good argument and I agreed with it, right? I don't agree now. Because we're now a year down the road and I don't see how I don't think my fiduciary responsibility allows me to say that we can, I don't want to say casually, but that we can make that we can adopt a placeholder budget with this little understanding around why a placeholder is okay. And I'm not saying I can't get there, but you guys haven't gotten me there yet.
Matt, did you have a motion? There was something to grab onto.
Yeah, we keep throwing around the term placeholder budget. I'm still not clear on how that works, but I would like to make a motion that we at the very least reconvene the budget advisory committee at some point mid-year to put some finality to the budget, because placeholder budgets do not last a full year. That is just the budget.
Right.
So I would like to put that motion out there, that we reconvene the budget committee at some point 5-6 months from now.
Sure, you have to explain the state law on this, but I don't think that's legal.
Please do.
Thank you, Matt, for the vote.
We have the one time to approve the budget and then it has to be approved before the fiscal year begins July 1. Once it's approved, it is an as-is budget. You guys approve it and then it goes to the VOC in June for final adoption. Do you want to add anything?
There are other counties though that are, and so we would need to review that, but for example, the fiscal sustainability work that is going on in the other counties, Tillamook County was one in particular where they had convened their budget committee early to look at that process.
So how,
Most definitely can. You just have to publicly notice it in the newspaper, but that would not be the same as passing the document, right? So that would be more strategic speak, that you guys act on the recommendations that would then feed into and you could even do current year budget adjustments. You could say, hey, we didn't find what we needed. I want 10% cuts across the board, and the board of commissioners then could have a resolution to vote on that. And then we implement it direct.
so we can't technically work on the budget or pass the budget outside those times, but that was gonna be my question. But we can ask the people that have so generously offered their time to us to convene
You
later.
just have to publicly notice that the budget committee is re-meeting.
We did it twice last year. So we can certainly have meetings. The Board of Commissioners invited you guys in twice in the previous year, I think it was, to ask for your assistance on things, but we weren't discussing changing appropriations for the current fiscal year. That's what you can't do. In fact, the Board of Commissioners is not even legally allowed to start talking about appropriations before a budget has been presented for the following year. We can have general discussions, we can look at models, we can do all sorts of fiscal stuff, but we can't deliberate on appropriations until a budget meeting has been called.
And we have very talented directors. They're not gonna go over budget. They're gonna do what you tell them to do. They're gonna operate within the numbers they have. So if you approve the budget, they have the authority to spend that budget. They're not gonna go over.
Right.
I don't know that I can guarantee you significant income from raised fees this budget year, but
So I think you raise an important point, which is, this is a budget. We're being asked to approve the budget.
It's not a placeholder.
It's a budget.
Budget.
It's a budget. It has some lack of detail or clarity in it that I think Allison and the staff wish were there because of the ongoing process, but this is a budget. So I actually really appreciate
I was gonna say was-
to help us get to that clarity.
I was calling it treading water, but it's not really not treading water, it's sinking at a defined rate.
Going off the cliff and we're drowning.
Yeah, the analogies aren't great, but Sherry made an excellent point that we know that it's not going to be worse than the budget that we have in front of us. And I think, that's the way to see the glass as half full, right? And so that's absolutely true. Again, are we willing to live with that picture? And I personally need to hear more, need to understand more about how we get to sustainability and seeing a vague list of the different ways that the state allows you to raise revenue. I already knew that whole list. There's nothing that I didn't know.
And that was my caution about providing
I
a
know,
high level.
you did more.
Yeah, is that there's an in-depth report that is coming, yeah. So,
Arthur, would it give you some comfort if we modified Matt's motion to essentially say that we move to adopt this budget, this proposed budget, with the understanding that within the next 4 months, the Board of Commissioners will have recommendations, a solid plan, focused on two things. Jennifer suggested, I think it was Letty that suggested plans for partnering with other organizations to shift service delivery to them rather than have the county continue to pay for it. Because other organizations don't pay first. And a second caveat keying off, I think what Jennifer said, going back to the revenue, just coming up with definitive plans for both revenue enhancement and the staging of that revenue. Would that help if we said, here's a timeline, we're gonna say within 4 months, we have the plan to change service delivery and to propose revenue changes?
do you,
Is
if I
it
may,
possible?
to consider the change of service delivery, outside of the context of everything else, I think that it warrants a conversation. So I would be concerned about, just my perspective, concerned about putting.
Would we be, is your motion that we would actually come up with a concrete plan for those two things, or just have them on our agenda? Because if it turns out that, I think what you're getting at is the complications of service delivery, it could be more complicated. But definitely, we need to have conversations that start both of those conversations about the revenue thing too. The fees, and also whether or not to go out for. I mean, I don't know that we can have all of those things for sure. You find out in factories.
Yeah, I don't know what's reasonable. I was just trying to get.
I'm
I
not taking specific numbers. I'm looking at the form of what you're saying. I think you're getting at something very meaningful, which is what I'm requesting is a plan, right? And you're saying, well, what if we had a plan? I'm saying, yeah, that's what I'm asking for. And you're talking about sort of a stylized form of a plan. I think the other piece to the discussion is what sort of additional management controls do you put in place while you are without a plan? And I think it's worth us spending a little time talking about that, since we're not gonna have a plan today, maybe we can ask staff to be more specific about what a plan might look like. What the timing of a plan might look like, and come back to us next week with that. I'd like to understand also kind of what management controls we might consider putting in place, so that we can keep things metered, keep things on the rails.
Suggesting perhaps, Arthur, that we're asking for a list of discretionary things in your budget that directors could put off or delay or conceivably not do if they didn't have the money.
I believe that those are already out.
Yeah, some
If those things are there, that's, certainly, absolutely bring that forward. I don't think that we can find anything there. I'm thinking more of understanding what positions are currently open, what positions are currently being advertised, what positions aren't being advertised, but are open, what retirements are imminent, or what, or at least a sort of model of what retirements are imminent, and what the budgetary impacts of that might be, because I do want a way to, a glide path to me involves not laying anyone off, right? I'm not looking to reduce, I'm not, I don't want to say reduce FTEs, because you might be reducing FTEs, but only through attrition. I'm not looking to ask people to leave while we're trying to figure this out, because when we come up with a good solution, then we're kicking ourselves for having lost skilled and qualified people. So that was a point that we spent a lot of time talking about last year, and I think just sort of obviously moves forward to this year. But how do you, what additional controls can we put in place so that I can be comfortable, and other commissioners can be comfortable that we're sufficiently responsive to the. What's going to happen is we're going to have a plan that's presented. There's going to be a bunch of ideas, and we're going to look at rolling those forward. We each got to handicap those to some percent in our heads, and based on that, we may want to start downsizing before the end of the year through attrition. And I don't think we have tools in place today to do that.
So how about if, at the time they advertised for vacancy, each department head was asked to sort of re-justify it. To explain that, yes, 6 months later, after the planning was done, yeah, we still need this, and here's why, and here's how we'll fund it. Here would be the consequences if we delayed. So you're not just saying a blanket freeze on all hiring at this point, but rather you're asking, when a specific vacancy comes open, bring it to the commission and let us take one more look at it.
I thought that's what
I feel.
I don't see the difference. I thought that's what I was asking for.
Okay.
Well, and I think in our home rule charter, that's a delegated analysis that I, as the county administrator, go through. And we went through that process, which is why we effectively managed through last year to come up with the beginning fund balance that we did.
Would you be willing to do monthly reports to the Board of Commissioners
have been doing
regarding
that.
your monitoring of personnel budget versus actual?
And have been doing that in my administrative report. So there is a monthly head count with our new HR team. They're doing a great job. That is presented to the board. So there's an overview of what's open, what's being advertised, what's coming.
Does that?
No, because it doesn't give us a control over it. Right, and you're saying you don't think it's legal for us to do that? You think our charter doesn't allow that?
I would read our charter as that's a delegated authority to administer the operation.
So once the budget is passed, we can't declare an emergency and say we're gonna hit a cliff. We're gonna hit a cliff.
The
We're
board,
gonna hit a wall.
the board has the authority to declare an emergency. Yes, absolutely. But it's just the managing of each, like bringing forward, that feels administrative versus policy.
This is an issue about which I feel fairly strongly, which is that we are a policy board. Because been in situations where boards of director had the kind of control that, first of all, it's hard on morale, and we're also not the administrators, and also we evaluate the administrators. So if we make the hard decisions for the administrator, then who are we evaluating at the end of the year? And I feel that it's a either it's policy or it's management. And there's a bunch of counties, since I've been a commissioner, I've learned there's all these counties where you elect people and they actually are the administrators. And so to me, being elected because you are interested in policy is different than making your career that of running municipal and state and county organizations. And that's why we evaluate the administrator. And I take extremely seriously our job to hire, evaluate, and keep or fire the administrator. Because when that's not our job, there's 5 of us that are gonna decide these things. To me, this is minutia that, and to me, the proof is in the pudding, in that last year, we trusted that without a hiring freeze, all of these decisions would be made carefully and re-examined, and I believe they are, and that is why we are in the position we are vis-a-vis, the money that we have left over. So that's how I think about it.
If we had wound up, if the result of this past year was a $1 million spending down, I would agree with you. It's 2 million. And I'm trying to describe circumstances under which I would be willing to support a tremendously non-sustainable budget. So I think that's an unusual circumstance. And I've been involved in a lot of management. I've been involved in a lot of policy boards. And I understand the difference, and I appreciate, your desire to focus this on policy. And I think that that's reasonable and appropriate. What I'm saying is what management controls can be put in place so that I can be confident that that approving the $3.44 million spending down in reserves doesn't actually result in that end. If we really wind up with under our 15% reserves at the end of this cycle, then I think that we've done something seriously wrong, because I don't think we have solutions that we can put in place fast enough. And I think we're not going to have time to get to those solutions.
Well, I think we've made very clear what it is we expect. And about halfway through this whole process, we will be doing the administration. We'll be evaluating our administrator in November, December. And at that point, we will know whether or not these expectations that we very specifically had after we passed the budget, if we're on that track, we'll know where we are on that. And to me, that's our job, is to evaluate whether or not that's what's happening.
Okay, so there is a policy alternative to that then. Show me a budget. What I heard is description of a process, which in my appraisal is going to take 3 years. So show me a budget that gives us 3 years to do this. You showed
How about,
right?
no, I don't know how this will translate, but if we could save $1 million out of that budget, out of the deficit, that would give us, we would have another $1 million for our general fund next year. So then we would have 2 years of funding. And in the meantime, we put these solutions forward, which could kick along with savings and transfer of services, that maybe we could get through that.
So you'd like to see another $1 million cut by next week? You would be comfortable with that?
Somehow out of that budget. I don't know how you do that, but
Combination of revenues and expenditure reductions.
yeah.
Like to make another motion.
Yeah, perfect.
I move that we ask staff to give us a plan for increasing user fee revenues. According, in line with the summary from Baker Tilly, in line with some of the recommendations that they had. Give us a breakdown of what that could look like over the next year. And any options included with that for the next meeting. Presumably before the next meeting, so we have a chance to digest it.
So you're asking to rework the budgetary numbers for the fees.
Yes, just the fee portion that they discussed specifically.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor to ask staff to revise the revenue side of the budget to integrate the Baker Tilly type of recommendations. What do you think you could get in fees in that regard? Did I get that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we
Just
deliberate.
debate, yeah.
Is that something, usually when fees are calculated, there's a fair amount of time that's spent on them and a fair amount of analysis that goes into doing that. How long does it traditionally take, or how long would you expect it would take to do a good job at what Matt number one or number two, I forget which is which. Number two. Your number two, okay, what Matt number two is requested.
Typically, you would do an in-depth user study, that would take 6 months or so. Sherry has done a fast analysis and.
Eric and Trish, so environmental health and Eric's fees were evaluated when I caught a hint of this a couple weeks ago. And these days you can benchmark counties very quickly with AI. So I used that. Eric looked up comparative counties that he was familiar with. So he knew that their organization was like our organization. And he came up about average. Is that right? You were.
I would say that we are low as far as the percentage of other counties, as far as how much of their general fund is used to support planning department. However, I think it's important to note that, when you talk about planning department fees, let's just say, I think in our budget, it's around $125,000 that we would expect based on current trajectories. And even if you double that, you're talking about, maybe another $120,000. So it's not be a significant amount of money. But we can certainly evaluate those further, but I just wanted to.
We couldn't find $900,000 is what I'm trying to get to. We could not find $900,000.
Not with that one department's increase of that amount.
That was the big.
Understood.
But that was the one.
That was the one that we're on the whole one.
Understood. But it also, to me, sounds like we are kind of behind just percentage wise in how much we should be,
There's
Bring-
also the user fees, so you think about
Yes.
special event permits, you think about. The other things that we do across the county where we're charging the daily fee. That takes more of an in-depth analysis.
Does this also include campgrounds, for instance?
I think it could, in regards to campground fees.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to request that staff rework fees more assertively and align with this Baker Tilly and kind of see what could be garnered there. Any further discussion on that motion?
I guess the question is how much work are we asking staff to do? I don't have a problem with asking a question, but if it's a question that we're asking them in a week to figure out something that usually takes 6 months to do, then I'm not going to be expecting to learn a lot from the process. So I don't know how to evaluate what I just heard.
Go ahead, Allison.
Would it make sense for the budget committee to provide direction to us? We have a department head, they've all been listening to the conversation. We have a department head meeting Monday morning. So to go in and look at, a combination of revenues. So for example, I talked about the health department one that we weren't anticipating. The fees, combination of what they see right now that could provide additional savings in this year's budget.
and bring that back.
So both the savings,
And revenue.
more savings and more revenue. And may I ask one more question about the fees? Did I hear earlier that there's a cap on the percent that you can increase the fees in 1 year?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Did someone say that?
Just said that we could only have the 2 meetings per year.
No. When we were talking about fees, I thought that there was a rule about how much the fees could go up annually. No,
I'm seeing,
okay.
Yeah,
that's right.
On any
All right.
specific thing.
Well, the environmental health fees have to be approved by OHA.
Okay,
That is one of our
right. Okay.
stipulations, so.
both these fees are up for approval by the BOC in the June. Yeah, it was planning to go in June.
Okay. Right, so there could have been a friendly amendment, or you could perhaps withdraw your motion and we could try again with another one, or we could keep going as we are. What would be your preference, Matt?
Yeah, it sounds like everything is gonna be reevaluated in June as far as like just countywide fee structure.
The fees are going up in June. We already have that. I don't want you to think, I heard $900,000 from community development. And we're already deep in that research. I see other funding streams in other counties going to their community development department, where we take the same funding streams into our non-departmental to help cover the general fund as a whole. So I don't see 900,000, but we are gonna do the best we can.
Of course. Yeah, I don't have a number in mind. It just sounds like this process needs to happen at some point. I would like it to happen as soon as practical. Because it's necessary and it's vital. And it sounds like we possibly are behind a little bit in our, in this one revenue stream. So
Yeah, I think all of the department directors have on their radar screen, and Sophie does a reminder to all of them for those 2 meetings to do their review of their fees and offer any adjustments. And then for Commissioner vote.
So we've got a motion on the floor. We need to disposition in some manner.
it sounds like the motion I made is already in the works, right? So I'd like to retract that,
Okay.
take that back.
I didn't set it up on my Robert rules before today's meeting, but okay.
You can't do that,
So-
but no one's gonna complain.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Okay, so the motion's been withdrawn because it appears staff is willing to go ahead without very specific board committee direction. Okay,
I guess I would ask that, and I'm not sure if this is the motion, maybe someone can help me. I'd like to understand, in broad strokes, what our plan to restore sustainability looks like.
okay,
And that would in turn help me understand how much of reserve I'm willing to burn in this current year,
mhm,
which would then determine what budget I would be willing to vote for. So how can we get, what
mhm,
would my
Right.
motion be to get us to
right,
a plan? To get us to an understanding of the plan and what the length of time is that we have to make this reserve last.
mhm. I guess I've heard two things that would help me feel like I had my high beams on, which is some form of a 5-year projection with the scenarios about what's getting plugged in there. And then also some form of sort of a 26, 27 task timeline for when is the final report gonna be in, when are the priorities gonna be set, when would you see fee revenue starting? Those are two things that I've heard that were like, that would help me feel more comfortable with this budget. Are there other things that others have heard? If we're gonna try to sidle up to get comfortable, with this budget?
Well, I gotta just, because I'm the one who asked about last week, on the contract, services.
Yeah.
It's like $2.2 million out of this budget. I tried to wade through and kind of say, okay, this is like IT, legal, whatever. I don't run a department. I don't know how much stuff costs. What I did notice was that there's a headline number and then you dig into all the tabs. And there was $600,000 of unknown or sort of unaffiliated costs on that spreadsheet. Where there was either like not a note, there was, I mean, some of them, 50. I noticed, for example, sheriff's corrections tab had $140,000 on that summary. There was no tab affiliating with any of those contracts. So I'm not trying to manage $10,000 contracts, but $600,000 is
So bring back.
a fair amount of money to chase down. So maybe in that Monday morning meeting, if we could demand a little more granularity
Yep.
on that stuff.
It was a short period of time, if I may.
No, I appreciate that.
And there was confusion by some on the template that I sent out.
Okay.
And so I had to put unknown in, either where there wasn't, like I had mine a little bit. So on my tab, there was like 10 or 15,000 unknown. And that's how I reported everyone if they couldn't report a description back to me. There was confusion specifically with corrections, it's our parole and probations. Theirs is called program expense, but it is in the same category. It goes into, and you would ask about contracted services. So when you close that up, I asked for those program expense and she didn't relate it to contracts.
And it's also another where she's getting a distribution on a biennial basis, so
Okay.
you're having to store.
So there's
program
not $600,000 in a cookie jar to, well, I mean, worth maybe just digging into. I mean, if we can find $200,000, that's certainly all.
So how do we find out how many years we have to make our reserves last?
You guys had that 223 discussion at this body, right? At a past point in time, we've discussed that it's sort of outdated at best, it's changed. That's sort of kind of what would be useful going forward, really, is to figure out what, if those need to be hard stops, then they should be hard, and then we could say the budget's not doing that, so something has to change before proposed, right? But as it is, it's definitely soft and it's outdated, it's
But I think that's part of the 5-year plan also that Chris was asking for, is looking at the flow of that and then how far the reserves go. Was that what you were asking for?
I think so. I'm just thinking of what Clayton was saying, 2223 was the definition of the glide path. I was sitting in the audience listening to this and I ordered the commissioners and said, how are you gonna get from here to there? And that's the same question I'm asking today. And I'm in the same position again. I'm not particularly happy to be there. So I need to see, so you're right, it was never intended to be a long-term, that was a resolution to find how we got to a levy. And so that's what it did, and it got us through there, and it was never intended to be the long-term reserves thing, and so
there needs to be one. That would be a recommendation this body would submit to the board of commissioners, get adopted, and the next year a budget would look very different if that were the case.
And I think
there'll
it's,
be hard discussions with it.
yeah, I think it's reasonable to estimate that we're gonna have the draft report of Baker Tilly next week, so the question in regards to the timeline for having a plan, we can put some dates to that. Now that we have some surety for when that's coming out, we have dates of June 15th, we've got dates set for putting together an implementation workshop. So, all in June.
Okay. For overtime, thank you everyone for your time and patience. Are there any other pressing, I mean, we're gonna be up against a decision next week. We've asked for some additional info. Anything else that anyone wants to ask for or share as an important thought now as we go away and consider during our recess through the coming week? What we're gonna decide next week.
I heard a couple of things in regards to open positions.
Yeah, that's what I was just taking of, that was my big sigh, I was trying to figure out how to say that. I plan to be asking Sherry and Clayton a bunch of questions so that I can better understand the nature of this budget. How close this is to a budget that is actually using reasonable assumptions for what positions are filled and not filled. And so I'm gonna be doing that. I don't think that has to be a request. Staff has always been very willing to answer my questions.
Okay. Your question sort of like, what's the likelihood that we end up with 2.4 in unallocated million in unallocated balances at the end of the year or something?
I'm trying to understand a lot of things, but if you crunch. Yeah, I want to look at the data and see where it takes me.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Is next week it? Like, we can't succeed on that meeting. It's next week or bust, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, that's not, I don't agree that that's correct.
It's staff's request to have a good amount of a reasonable amount of time to prepare. That's really the
Right,
thing that we
but
need.
there are special arrangements that can be made and there can be special meetings called, et cetera, too.
Yes.
So our recommendation was to try to shoot for next week. We did last year go 1 week longer, I think, and we barely got that turned around in time to get it to the auditors for them to give us a second preview and make sure that it was gonna pass audit, not cause problems. So we'd be foregoing that if that takes longer.
Right.
Like you could call other meetings, not.
Right, you're trying to meet a specific BOC meeting, which you don't have to meet. Right? BOC meeting.
No, we're trying to get the LB1 published in the amount of time that it's sort of lawfully required,
Right.
Yes, which
is related to
is
BOC
related to
meeting where we
BOC,
pass
so
it.
it ultimately-
We schedule a special meeting to pass.
It's
approve
ultimately
the LB1s.
that takes the order, but
Yeah.
yeah, ultimately it's true about the BOC meeting. So yeah, you could delay the BOC meeting, then that's possible.
Or, yes, we could get a vote a week later than the VOC.
Right, we can do a 5-minute Zoom meeting to complete the process if we have
Thank you.
to.
That's helpful to understand.
Do we need a motion for that? To adjust our schedule, or is that just something we can?
I'm willing to wait till next week and see where we are.
So you need a motion to recess.
Sure.
Are there? Are you?
I usually just do it.
Yeah,
I'm a power hungry.
she did recess.
I took the meeting in recess until next week.